Hello chess lovers! As you know, currently Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana are fighting for the chess crown, and in this video I would like to share with you the first game from that encounter. The match is being played in London at the college in Holborn, and believe it or not, but the Emmy Award winning actor and chess superfan Woody Harrelson, mishearing Caruana's whisper, made the ceremonial first move and placed the d-pawn on d4. But then e4 came as Caruana's first choice, and Carlsen responded with c5, Sicilian defense. With this move, Carlsen is like saying that he's ready for a fight, and just from the first game he wants a whole point. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Caruana goes for Nejmetino for a Solimo attack g6, bishop takes c6, d takes c6, d3, bishop g7, h3, knight f6, knight c3. Previously against Caruana in 2015, in here Carlsen played b6, and in that game Carlsen managed to beat Caruana, but in this game after knight c3 we see knight d7, bishop e3, e5, white castles kingside, b6, knight h2, white is preparing f4, knight f8, and f4 is on the board. E takes f4, rook takes f4. White will now start putting pressure on black's kingside by using the semi-open f-file and bishop e6. After knight f8, it would have been logical to play knight e6, but the thing is that after rook f2, knight d4, queen d2, the idea is to offer an exchange of dark squared bishops. Now if black plays h6, then this time white can respond with rook f1, and if bishop e6, then knight g4, and then knight f6 is coming. This can be unpleasant for black. That's why after rook takes f4, Carlsen responded with bishop e6, and at the moment the knight on f8 is somewhat problematic. Rook f2, h6. Of course, Carlsen knew that Caruana would play queen d2 with the idea of offering an exchange of dark squared bishops. That's why he played h6, queen d2, and this time g5. Carlsen is freeing the g6 square for the knight. Rook f1, queen d6, knight g4, and Carlsen castled queenside. We have an opposite side castlings, and this is going to be a very promising game. Knight f6, knight d7, knight h5, bishop e5. Look at these black bishops eyeballing on white's kingside. g4. White is looking up the kingside, but is doing it in the cost of weakening his kingside. f6, b3, bishop f7, knight d1, knight f8. An interesting decision by Carlsen. He's going for a pawn sacrifice. Knight takes f6, knight e6, and knight h5. Well, knight d7 also looks interesting. The idea is that if rook takes d7, then rook takes f7, but the thing is that after knight d7, black can simply play bishop f4, and if knight f6, then h5 can be a good response. In here, white can go for an exchange sacrifice, but in the end of the day, actually black is managing to gain a slightly better position. That's why after knight e6, Caruana chose a comparatively safer knight h5 move. Bishop takes h5, g takes h5, knight f4, an excellent square for the knight. That's why Caruana instantly got rid of that knight, and g takes f4. This time Carlsen managed to open up the g file, and this can be dangerous for white king. Rook g2. Instead of rook g2, rook takes f4 looks another interesting alternative. If bishop takes f4, then queen takes f4. If queen d4 check, then knight e3. And then this knight can either jump on g4 or on f5. White has a compensation. But in the game after g takes f4, we see rook g2, rook g8, queen e2. We see the exchange of first pair of rooks on g2, queen e6, knight f2, rook g8, and the knight is on g4 and is successfully protecting white king. Queen e8. Carlsen is coming after the pawn on h5, queen f3, queen takes h5, king f2. Caruana is trying to move away his king from this dangerous king side, and already he was under a terrible time trouble. Bishop c7, king e2, queen g5, Carlsen wants to kick away the knight from this active square, knight h2 and h5. The knight looks very passive and white should think about activating it. Rook f2 queen g1, knight f1 h4. Well, instead of h4, Carlsen could try exploiting the weaknesses of the dark squares. If c3 then b5 and then a5. This time the attack on the queen side could give black some chances, but in the game after knight f1 we see h4, king d2, king b7, c3 and bishop e5. Instead of bishop e5, actually the move which could give black a real winning chances was rook g3, a destructive move after which white is in serious trouble. Now, if rook g2, then this time queen b1 is coming. If d4, then black queen can start munching white pawns. If d5, then bishop e5, and white is in trouble. How is white going to save this position? The a pawn is coming. Black is winning, but Carlsen missed his chance, and after c3 he played bishop e5. But that rook g3 move could be a huge ornament of this tournament. King c2, queen g7. This time Carlsen is coming after the pawn on c3, but in return after bishop takes c3, Caruana captured the f pawn, bishop d4, queen f7 check, king a6. Of course, black won't allow white rook to penetrate the 7th rank. We see the exchange of queens on g7, rook e2, rook g3. Carlsen is coming after the pawn on h3, but now the e pawn is marching forward. That's why the black rook is hurrying back in order to stop the e pawn. Knight h6, h3, knight f5, bishop f6, a3, b5, b4, c takes b4, a takes b4, and bishop takes e7, and after knight takes e7, h2, Carlsen won back the sacrificed piece. This is move 55, and we are in a rook endgame where black has an extra pawn. Actually, they could agree to draw, but the players went on playing for several hours, and finally the game ended up on move 115. As I've already mentioned, black has an extra pawn, but it's going to be extremely difficult to realize that advantage. Of course, there are some underwater stones. White has to be careful, but all in all, the endgame is drawn and there is not much black can do. Of course, Carlsen is a great expert in endgames. He tried his luck. Definitely he was disappointed that in the middle part of the game he didn't manage to realize the advantage, and then he was trying somehow to bring back that half point, and then the king is approaching, but in return black won the pawn on a6, white won the pawn on d4, but still there is not much white can do. Carlsen's king came near, but still white is holding successfully, and finally after rook a8 the players agreed to a draw. Although in this game Carlsen had a real chance of winning the game, but he missed his chance, and once again Caruana's defense turned out to be impregnable. Of course, this will be a huge disappointment for Carlsen, but we are impatiently waiting for the next game, where in round 2 Carlsen is going to play with the white pieces. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this game. For more games, consider subscribing to my channel. I will see you in the next video.